Rebecca Martinez had been riding the same dusty back road for 3 years, every morning at dawn, checking the fence lines on her family's cattle ranch in rural Texas. The gravel road stretched for miles through barren countryside, rarely traveled except by the occasional pickup truck or delivery van. She knew every pothole, every bend, every landmark along the way. On this particular Tuesday morning in September, something was different. As Rebecca guided her horse Thunder around the familiar curve near Miller's Creek, she spotted what looked like a bundle of clothes lying in the tall grass beside the road. Her first instinct was to keep riding. People dumped garbage out here all the time, and she had work to do. But something made her pull on the reins and take a closer look. The bundle moved slightly, and Rebecca's heart nearly stopped. It wasn't clothes at all. Two small children, a boy and a girl who couldn't have been more than 6 and 4 years old, were huddled together in the weeds, barely conscious. Their clothes were torn and dirty, their faces streaked with tears and dust. The little girl was shivering despite the warm morning sun, while the boy kept his protective arm around her shoulders. Rebecca immediately dismounted and approached them carefully, speaking in a soft voice so she wouldn't frighten them further. "Hey there, sweethearts. My name is Rebecca. Are you hurt?" The children looked up at her with wide, terrified eyes but said nothing. She could see they were dehydrated and exhausted, probably having been there for hours, maybe even overnight. What made Rebecca's blood boil wasn't just the sight of these abandoned children. It was the fresh tire tracks in the dirt beside the road, multiple sets of them. Cars had been driving past these kids all morning, maybe even the night before, and no one had stopped to help. She could see where vehicles had slowed down, the tire marks showing hesitation, but then continued on their way. The little boy finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "We're lost. Our daddy left us here and said he'd come back, but that was when the sun was way up there." He pointed to where the sun had been much higher in the sky, indicating they'd been waiting for hours. The girl just whimpered and clung to her brother. Rebecca felt a surge of protective anger. She'd grown up on this ranch, knew every family for miles around, and these children didn't belong to anyone she recognized. Someone had deliberately abandoned them in the middle of nowhere, and apparently, several people had driven right past without offering help. She quickly called 911 on her cell phone, though the signal was weak in this remote area. While waiting for the call to connect, she gave the children water from her canteen and wrapped them in the spare blanket she always carried in her saddlebags. The boy introduced himself as Tyler and his sister as Emma. They were scared, hungry, and confused, but they trusted Rebecca instinctively. As the morning progressed and help arrived, Rebecca would discover that this was just the beginning of a much larger story of neglect and indifference that would shake their small community to its core. The ambulance arrived 45 minutes after Rebecca's call, followed closely by Sheriff Deputy Mike Johnson and a social worker named Patricia Wells. Rebecca had managed to get the children to drink some water and eat a granola bar from her pack, but they were still weak and disoriented. Tyler kept asking when their daddy was coming back, while Emma had stopped talking altogether. Deputy Johnson was a veteran officer who'd seen his share of difficult situations, but even he looked shaken as he knelt beside the children. "How long do you think they've been out here?" he asked Rebecca quietly, away from the kids' hearing. "Tyler said their father left them when the sun was way up there," Rebecca replied, pointing to the eastern sky. "Based on where he pointed, I'd guess that was yesterday afternoon, maybe around 3 or 4 o'clock. They've been here at least 18 hours, maybe longer." Patricia Wells, the social worker, was documenting everything with her camera and notebook. She photographed the tire tracks, the spot where the children had been found, and the condition of their clothes. "This is clearly abandonment," she told Deputy Johnson. "We need to find out who these children belong to and why they were left here." What disturbed Rebecca most was learning from Deputy Johnson that the 911 dispatch had received 2 other calls about something by the road in the past 12 hours. One caller had reported seeing debris near Miller's Creek, but hadn't stopped to investigate. Another had mentioned seeing kids playing in the ditch, but assumed they lived nearby and were just fooling around. "People saw them," Rebecca said, her voice tight with anger. "People actually saw these bobbies out here and did nothing. How do you see 2 small children alone on a deserted road and just keep driving?" Deputy Johnson sighed heavily. "You'd be surprised how often people assume someone else will handle it, or that it's not their business. The bystander effect is real, especially in cases like this where stopping might mean getting involved in something complicated." As the paramedics checked the children's vital signs and prepared them for transport to the hospital, Rebecca learned more about their situation. Tyler, who was more talkative now that he felt safe, explained that their daddy had been really mad about something and had told them to wait by the road while he went to get gas. He'd promised to come back with food and sodas, but as the hours passed, the children had grown increasingly frightened and confused. Emma, the 4-year-old, had wet herself during the night and was deeply embarrassed. Rebecca gently assured her that it was okay, that she'd been very brave, and that none of this was her fault. The little girl finally spoke, asking if Rebecca would come with them to the hospital. The request broke Rebecca's heart. "I'll follow right behind the ambulance," Rebecca promised, though she wasn't sure if the hospital would allow her to stay with children who weren't her responsibility. She was just a stranger who'd found them, but she already felt fiercely protective of Tyler and Emma. As the ambulance pulled away, Rebecca stood in the road looking at the tire tracks in the dirt. Someone had made a deliberate decision to abandon these innocent children. Multiple people had driven past without helping. The whole situation filled her with a burning determination to make sure justice was served, and that Tyler and Emma got the care and protection they deserved. She mounted Thunder and began the ride back to the ranch, her mind already working on what she could do to help these children and ensure the person responsible faced consequences. At Mercy General Hospital, Rebecca sat in the pediatric ward waiting room, still wearing her dusty riding clothes and boots. She'd called her father, ranch foreman Carlos Martinez, to explain why she'd be late getting back to work. Carlos had immediately told her to stay with the children as long as needed. The fence repairs could wait. Dr. Amanda Foster, the pediatrician examining Tyler and Emma, emerged from the examination room looking grim. "They're dehydrated and malnourished," she told Rebecca, Patricia Wells and Deputy Johnson. Not just from being abandoned yesterday, this looks like chronic neglect. These children haven't been properly fed or cared for in weeks, maybe months. Rebecca felt her hands clench into fists. What kind of monster does this to Bobby's? The kind we need to find quickly, Deputy Johnson replied. He'd been making calls and had some preliminary information. I ran their descriptions through our database and reached out to neighboring counties. We might have a match. There's been a missing persons report filed in Brewster County for 2 children matching their descriptions. A woman named Linda Hoffman reported that her ex-husband took the kids 3 weeks ago and never brought them back. Patricia Wells looked up from her notes. 3 weeks. These children have been missing for 3 weeks, and no one issued an Amber Alert. It's complicated, Deputy Johnson explained. The father, Danny Hoffman, had partial custody rights. The mother reported it as a custody violation, not a kidnapping. Different protocols apply, and things can get tied up in family court bureaucracy. Rebecca stood up abruptly, packing to the window. So while lawyers and judges shuffled papers, these bobbies were being starved and eventually abandoned on a roadside. This is exactly the kind of red tape that lets children fall through the cracks. Dr. Foster nodded grimly. I've documented everything for the official report. These children show signs of prolonged neglect, poor dental hygiene, untreated minor injuries, and evidence of inconsistent meals. The abandonment was just the final act in a pattern of abuse. Through the window of the examination room, Rebecca could see Tyler sitting protectively next to Emma's hospital bed, holding her hand while she slept. A nurse had given him a coloring book, but he kept looking toward the door, still waiting for his father to come back with the sodas he'd promised. What happens to them now? Rebecca asked Patricia Wells. Emergency custody goes to the state while we locate the mother and investigate the father. If Linda Hoffman is truly their mother and can provide a safe home, we'll work toward reunification. But first, we need to find Danny Hoffman and arrest him for child abandonment and endangerment. Deputy Johnson's radio crackled with an incoming call. After a brief conversation, he looked up with a mix of satisfaction and disgust. We found him. Danny Hoffman was arrested 2 hours ago at a casino in Oklahoma. Apparently, he's been there for 3 days, gambling away his unemployment benefits while his children were dying on the side of the road. Rebecca felt a cold fury wash over her. He was gambling. He left those bobbies to die so he could gamble. It gets worse, Deputy Johnson continued. When Oklahoma police arrested him, he had over $4,000 in casino winnings in his pocket. He'd been on a winning streak and didn't want to leave the tables. That's why he dumped the kids. They were cramping his style. The nurse came out to update them on the children's condition. Tyler was asking for Rebecca specifically, wanting to know if she was the horse lady who was going to make sure they were safe. Emma had woken up and was crying for her mother, someone she apparently hadn't seen in weeks. Rebecca made a decision that would change everything. I want to help these children beyond just finding them. There has to be something more I can do. Rebecca spent the next 2 days at the hospital, taking shifts with the nurses to ensure Tyler and Emma were never alone. She'd brought coloring books, small toys, and even convinced the hospital administration to let her bring Thunder to the window so the children could see the horse that had led to their rescue. Linda Hoffman arrived on Thursday morning, a thin woman in her 30s with tired eyes and obvious signs of stress. She broke down crying when she saw her children, explaining to Rebecca how she'd been searching for them for 3 weeks. "Danny has problems," Linda said, sitting in the hospital cafeteria with Rebecca while Tyler and Emma napped. "Gambling, drinking, anger issues. I left him last year, but the court gave him supervised visitation. Then he started demanding overnight visits, and I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight it." Rebecca listened as Linda described a pattern of escalating irresponsibility. Danny would keep the children longer than agreed, return them hungry and dirty, and make increasingly erratic decisions. The final straw had been when he'd picked them up for a weekend visit and simply disappeared. "I filed reports with 3 different agencies," Linda continued. "Child Protective Services, the Sheriff's Department, even the FBI. But because we weren't divorced yet and he had custody rights, everyone said it was a civil matter. I felt like I was screaming into the void." This was exactly what Rebecca had suspected: institutional failures that put legal procedures ahead of children's safety. While adults argued about jurisdiction and paperwork, Tyler and Emma had been suffering. Dr. Foster updated them on the children's medical condition. "They're recovering well physically, but there will be psychological effects. Tyler has been having nightmares about being left alone again, and Emma has regressed in her speech and potty training. They'll need ongoing therapy." Rebecca made another decision. "I want to help with that. The medical bills, the therapy, whatever you need. This shouldn't be a financial burden on their mother." Linda looked at her with surprise. "You don't even know us. Why would you do that?" "Because I found them," Rebecca said simply. "And because every person who drove past them without stopping made a choice to look the other way. I'm making a different choice." Deputy Johnson arrived with news about Danny Hoffman's arrest. "He's been charged with child abandonment, endangerment, and neglect. The district attorney in Oklahoma is also considering charges related to the gambling debts he incurred while his children were missing. Apparently, he'd been borrowing money from some dangerous people." Rebecca felt a grim satisfaction, but she knew prosecution was just the beginning. What about the people who saw these children and didn't stop? Is there any accountability there? "Legally, there's no obligation to render aid in Texas unless you're in a position of responsibility," Deputy Johnson explained. "It's morally reprehensible but not criminal." That evening, Rebecca sat with Tyler and Emma as they ate dinner, their first real meal in days. Tyler was chattering about wanting to see Thunder again, while Emma was slowly warming up to the idea that her mother was really there to take them home. "Miss Rebecca," Tyler said suddenly, "are you going to make sure the bad people don't hurt us anymore?" Rebecca looked into his trusting eyes and made a promise she intended to keep. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you and Emma are safe and happy. That's a promise." But even as she spoke, Rebecca was formulating a plan that went far beyond just helping Tyler and Emma. She was going to make sure their story became impossible to ignore. Rebecca returned to the ranch that Friday evening with a head full of plans and a heart full of righteous anger. Her father, Carlos, was waiting for her in the kitchen, having kept dinner warm. He'd been getting updates via text messages, but he wanted to hear the full story directly from his daughter. "Mija, you look like you haven't slept in days," he said, studying her face. "These children, they mean something special to you." Rebecca nodded, accepting the plate of her father's famous enchiladas. "Papa, I keep thinking about all the people who drove past them. How do you see Bobby's on the side of the road and just keep going?" Carlos sat down across from her, his weathered hands folded on the table. "Sometimes people don't see what they don't want to see. Sometimes they assume someone else will handle it. And sometimes they're just too wrapped up in their own problems to notice anyone else's." "But that's not good enough," Rebecca said, her voice growing stronger. "Those excuses might work for adults, but not for children. Tyler and Emma could have died out there." "So what are you going to do about it?" Carlos asked, knowing his daughter well enough to recognize when she was building up to something big. Rebecca pulled out her phone and showed him the photos she'd taken at the hospital, Tyler and Emma coloring, Emma laughing at thunder through the window, both children finally looking safe and cared for. "I'm going to tell their story. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what happened and how many people looked the other way." Carlos raised an eyebrow. "That's a big responsibility, Mija. Are you sure you want to take on that kind of attention?" Rebecca had been thinking about this for days. She'd grown up on social media, understood how stories spread, and knew the power of the right platform. "I'm going to post their story online. Not just the abandonment, but the whole thing, the multiple people who saw them and didn't stop, the system failures, everything." She'd already started writing the post in her head, crafting it like the stories she'd read on Reddit communities like "Our Justice Served" and "Our Entitled Parents." People loved stories about justice, about heroes stepping up when others failed, about protecting the innocent. "I'm going to start with the local Facebook groups," Rebecca explained. "Then the horse community pages, they're always sharing rescue stories. From there, maybe it'll spread to the bigger platforms." Carlos nodded approvingly. "Your mother always said you had a gift for telling stories. She'd be proud of you for using it to help these children." That night, Rebecca sat at her laptop, carefully crafting the post that would change everything. She started with the image that had haunted her all week: two small children huddled in the grass, waiting for help that almost never came. She wrote about the tire tracks, the missed opportunities, the system failures, and the final rescue. But she also wrote about hope, about the power of one person choosing to do the right thing, and about the community that had rallied around Tyler and Emma once their story became known. She included a GoFundMe link for their medical expenses and therapy costs, and she made sure to protect their privacy while still telling their story effectively. Before hitting post, Rebecca called Linda Hoffman to make sure she was comfortable with sharing the story. Linda not only approved, but asked Rebecca to include information about the warning signs of parental abandonment and resources for other families in similar situations. At 11:47 p.m. on Friday night, Rebecca Martinez posted the story that would be shared over 50,000 times in the next week, sparking conversations about community responsibility, child welfare, and the power of individual action. The post began, "3 days ago, I was doing my regular fence check when I found something that changed my life and broke my heart." By Sunday morning, Rebecca's post had been shared across dozens of Facebook groups, horse community pages, and local news websites. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications, friend requests, and messages from people wanting to help Tyler and Emma. The response was overwhelming. The GoFundMe she'd set up had raised over $15,000 in just 2 days. People were donating toys, clothes, and offering everything from free therapy services to college funds. Local businesses were reaching out, wanting to contribute to the children's care. But along with the support came criticism and debate. Some people questioned why Rebecca was sharing the children's story so publicly. Others argued that the people who'd driven past weren't obligated to stop, that it was unrealistic to expect strangers to get involved in every situation they encountered. Rebecca found herself in the middle of a community-wide conversation about responsibility, compassion, and the bystander effect. Local radio stations wanted interviews. The regional newspaper was preparing a feature story. Even a family vlogger with a large following had reached out about sharing the story with a wider audience. Linda Hoffman called Rebecca Sunday afternoon, her voice mixing gratitude with concern. "I never expected this much attention. Tyler keeps asking why so many people want to talk to us now when no one would help us before." It was a fair question, and one that Rebecca had been grappling with herself. "Sometimes it takes a story to make people see what was always there," she told Linda. "The important thing is that they're seeing it now." Rebecca had been tracking the online discussions about their story, and she was fascinated by the patterns she was seeing. People shared similar stories, times they'd seen something concerning but hadn't acted, times they'd been the person needing help that no one provided, times they'd been the one who stopped when others didn't. One comment particularly stuck with her from a woman named Jennifer. "I drove past something like this once about 10 years ago. I convinced myself it was probably nothing, that someone else would handle it. I still think about it sometimes, wondering if I made the right choice. This story makes me realize I probably didn't." Another commenter, a man named Robert, shared his own experience. "I was the kid on the side of the road once. Car broke down with my mom when I was 8, and we stood there for hours in the rain. Dozens of cars passed us. Finally, an old farmer stopped and helped us. I never forgot how invisible we felt until someone finally saw us." These stories were exactly what Rebecca had hoped to inspire. Not just donations and support for Tyler and Emma, but a broader conversation about how communities respond to vulnerable people in need. Deputy Johnson called Rebecca Monday morning with an update on Danny Hoffman's case. "The prosecutor is throwing the book at him. Child abandonment, endangerment, neglect, and now they're adding fraud charges related to his gambling debts. He's looking at serious prison time. Rebecca felt a grim satisfaction, but she knew prosecution was just one piece of the puzzle. What about preventing this from happening to other children? That's the million-dollar question, Deputy Johnson replied. The system worked eventually, but it took way too long. Your story has people asking hard questions about how we can do better. Rebecca was already thinking about that. The attention her story had generated was powerful, but temporary. She wanted to create something lasting, something that would make a real difference for other children who might find themselves in similar situations. She was beginning to formulate an idea that would take her efforts far beyond just helping Tyler and Emma. The local television news crew arrived at the ranch on Tuesday morning, and Rebecca found herself sitting in front of cameras for the first time in her life. The reporter, Maria Santos, was a veteran journalist who'd covered many stories about child welfare and community response to crisis situations. "What went through your mind when you first saw Tyler and Emma?" Maria asked, her voice gentle but professional. Rebecca thought carefully about her answer. "Honestly, my first instinct was to keep writing. I had work to do, and I thought it was just garbage someone had dumped. But something made me look closer, and I'm so grateful I did. I can't imagine what would have happened if I hadn't stopped." Your post on social media has sparked a lot of discussion about community responsibility. Some people are saying that strangers shouldn't be expected to get involved in every situation they encounter. How do you respond to that? Rebecca had been preparing for this question. I'm not saying everyone needs to be a hero, but when you see two small children alone on a deserted road, that's not a gray area. That's a clear situation where someone needs help. The people who saw them and didn't stop made a choice, and that choice almost cost Tyler and Emma their lives. After the interview, Rebecca spent the afternoon with Tyler and Emma at their mother's apartment. Linda had found a modest two-bedroom place in town, and with the help of donations from Rebecca's fundraising efforts, she'd been able to furnish it properly and take time off work to focus on her children's recovery. Tyler was showing remarkable resilience, chattering about wanting to visit the ranch and see thunder again. Emma was still quiet, but she was beginning to engage more with her toys and had started speaking in full sentences again. "Miss Rebecca," Tyler said, looking up from his coloring book, "my mom says you're the reason we're safe now. Are you like a superhero?" Rebecca laughed, ruffling his hair. "I'm just a regular person who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But you know what? Everyone can be a superhero sometimes, just by caring about other people and helping when someone needs it." Linda pulled Rebecca aside while the children played. "I've been thinking about what you said about creating something lasting. I want to help with that. Tyler and Emma's story shouldn't just be about what happened to them. It should be about making sure it doesn't happen to other kids." Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. "I've been thinking about that too. What if we created some kind of program to educate people about recognizing and responding to situations like this? Not just child abandonment, but any situation where someone needs help and people are hesitant to get involved. They spent the next hour brainstorming ideas. A social media campaign about bystander intervention, educational materials for schools and community groups, maybe even a scholarship program for children who'd been through traumatic situations. We could call it the Tyler and Emma Foundation, Linda suggested. Focus on child safety and community response. Rebecca felt a surge of excitement. That's perfect. We could use the momentum from the story to create something that really makes a difference. As she drove home that evening, Rebecca reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. She'd gone from being a rancher's daughter doing routine fence checks to being an advocate for child welfare and community responsibility. The attention was sometimes overwhelming, but the potential for positive impact was undeniable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Wells, the social worker who'd been involved in Tyler and Emma's case. Rebecca, I wanted you to know that your story has already made a difference. We've had 3 people call this week to report concerning situations they might have otherwise ignored. One case turned out to be a genuine emergency. Thank you for using your platform responsibly. Rebecca smiled, feeling more confident than ever that she was on the right path. The Tyler and Emma Foundation officially launched 3 weeks later, with a website, social media presence, and a clear mission: to educate communities about recognizing and responding to child welfare emergencies, and to support families affected by abandonment and neglect. Rebecca had partnered with Linda Hoffman, Patricia Wells, and several other local advocates to create educational materials and outreach programs. They'd also established a scholarship fund for children who'd experienced trauma, using Tyler and Emma's story as inspiration for helping other kids build better futures. The Foundation's first major initiative was a community presentation at the county courthouse, where Rebecca shared Tyler and Emma's story with an audience of parents, teachers, law enforcement officers, and social workers. She'd become a confident public speaker, driven by passion for the cause and the knowledge that her words could make a real difference. The bystander effect is real, Rebecca told the audience. When we see something concerning, we often assume someone else will handle it. But children can't wait for someone else to act. They need us to be their advocates right now, in the moment when they need help. Dr. Foster from the hospital had joined the presentation to discuss the medical and psychological indicators of child neglect and abandonment. Early intervention can mean the difference between a child recovering quickly and dealing with lifelong trauma, she explained. Community members who are educated about warning signs can be the first line of defense. Deputy Johnson presented statistics about child welfare cases in their county, noting that reports had increased by 30% since Rebecca's story went viral. We're seeing more people willing to make that phone call when they notice something isn't right. That's exactly what we want, a community that looks out for its most vulnerable members. Tyler and Emma attended the presentation, sitting in the front row with their mother. Tyler had drawn a picture of Thunder and Rebecca that he wanted to show everyone, while Emma had made a friendship bracelet for her horse lady. Both children were thriving in their new stable environment, attending regular therapy sessions and showing remarkable progress. After the presentation, Rebecca was approached by a woman named Catherine Mills, a regional director for the state's Child Protective Services Department. "I've been following your foundation's work," Catherine said. "We're interested in partnering with you to develop a statewide training program for communities. Your story has shown us the power of grassroots advocacy." Rebecca felt a thrill of possibility. What would that look like? "We could create a curriculum based on your presentation, train facilitators in communities across the state, and establish a network of advocates who can respond to situations like Tyler and Emma's. It would be a significant expansion of what you're already doing." The idea was exciting but also daunting. Rebecca had gone from being a rancher's daughter to running a foundation to potentially influencing state policy in just a few months. But when she looked at Tyler and Emma, healthy and happy and safe, she knew she was ready for whatever came next. Linda Hoffman had been listening to the conversation, and she stepped forward with a suggestion. "Rebecca, you've given us so much already, but I think there's one more thing Tyler and Emma would want you to know." She called the children over, and Tyler looked up at Rebecca with his serious 6-year-old expression. "Miss Rebecca, we want you to be our extra mom. Not instead of our real mom, but like a special mom who helps take care of us." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Horse Mom," she declared, making everyone laugh. Rebecca felt tears in her eyes as she hugged both children. "I would be honored to be your horse mom, and I promise I'll always be here when you need me." As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Rebecca stood in the courthouse parking lot looking up at the stars. 6 weeks ago, she'd been just another person going about her daily routine. Now she was part of something bigger, something that could create lasting change for vulnerable children. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria Santos, the television reporter who'd first interviewed her. "Rebecca, I wanted you to know that your story is being picked up by national media. CNN wants to do a feature on the foundation. Are you ready for that level of attention?" Rebecca thought about Tyler and Emma, about all the other children who might be helped by bringing more attention to these issues. She thought about the people who'd driven past without stopping, and the people who were now more likely to stop because of the conversation her story had started. "I'm ready," she texted back. "Let's do this." The CNN feature aired on a Tuesday evening in November, reaching millions of viewers across the country. Rebecca sat in Linda's apartment with Tyler and Emma, watching their story being told on national television. The segment included interviews with Rebecca, Linda, Tyler, who proudly showed off his artwork, and several experts on child welfare and community response. The feature generated an immediate response. Within hours, the Tyler and Emma Foundation's website had crashed from traffic, and Rebecca's phone was ringing constantly with interview requests, donation offers, and people wanting to start similar programs in their own communities. "This is incredible," Linda said, watching the social media metrics climb on her laptop. "Look at this. People are sharing the story from all over the country. Someone in Oregon wants to start a chapter there. A school district in Florida is asking about bringing your presentation to their teachers. Rebecca felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. We need to be strategic about this. We can't help everyone, but we can help people help themselves. Over the next month, Rebecca worked with a team of volunteers to develop materials that other communities could use to start their own versions of the Tyler and Emma Foundation. They created presentation templates, training materials, and resource guides that could be adapted for different regions and populations. The foundation also established a network of partner organizations, working with child protective services, law enforcement, healthcare providers, and educational institutions to create comprehensive community response systems. Tyler and Emma had become the unofficial mascots of the movement, appearing in educational materials and occasionally joining Rebecca for presentations. They were remarkable children, showing resilience and joy despite everything they'd been through. "Miss Rebecca," Tyler said one afternoon while they were visiting the ranch, "do you think other kids will be safer because of what happened to us?" Rebecca knelt down to his level, looking into his earnest eyes. "I think so, Tyler. I think there are going to be a lot of kids who get help faster because people learned from your story." Emma, now confident enough to ride Thunder with Rebecca's help, added her own observation. "And maybe people won't drive past anymore." "That's right, sweetheart. Maybe people won't drive past anymore." The foundation's impact was already measurable. Partner organizations reported increased awareness of child welfare issues, more people calling to report concerning situations, and faster response times to emergencies. Several children had been rescued from dangerous situations by community members who'd been educated through the Foundation's programs. Rebecca had also been working with legislators to propose changes to child welfare policies, including improved coordination between agencies and better training for first responders. The work was complex and sometimes frustrating, but she was learning to navigate the political landscape while staying focused on her core mission. One evening, as Rebecca was finishing up foundation work at her laptop, her father Carlos sat down beside her. "Mija, I'm proud of what you've accomplished, but don't forget to take care of yourself too. You can't help everyone if you burn out." Rebecca nodded, knowing he was right. The work was consuming, and she'd been neglecting some of her own needs in her passion to help others. "I'm learning to delegate more, Papa, and I'm making sure to keep time for the ranch, for Thunder, for the things that keep me grounded." "Good, because Tyler and Emma need you to be strong for the long haul, not just for the crisis moment." As winter approached, Rebecca reflected on how much had changed since that September morning when she'd found two children beside the road. She discovered that one person really could make a difference, but also that lasting change required sustained effort and community involvement. The Tyler and Emma Foundation was now a registered nonprofit with a board of directors, professional staff, and programs in 12 states. But at its heart, it remained the same simple mission: making sure no child was invisible to their community when they needed help most. Spring brought new challenges and opportunities for the Tyler and Emma Foundation. Rebecca had been invited to speak at a national conference on child welfare in Washington, D.C., where she would present alongside researchers, policymakers, and other advocates from around the country. The night before her presentation, Rebecca sat in her hotel room reviewing her notes and thinking about how far they'd all come. Tyler and Emma were thriving. Tyler had started first grade and was reading above grade level, while Emma was in preschool and had made several close friends. Linda had been able to return to work part-time while still being present for her children's ongoing therapy and recovery. The foundation had helped over 200 children in the past year, either directly through financial assistance or indirectly through community education programs that led to faster intervention in dangerous situations. They'd also established partnerships with national organizations and were working on legislation to improve child protection systems. But Rebecca never forgot that it all started with a simple choice to get off her horse and help two children who needed her. Her presentation at the conference was titled From Bystander to Advocate: How Community Response Can Save Lives. She began with the story of finding Tyler and Emma, but focused on the broader implications for child welfare and community responsibility. The bystander effect is one of the most dangerous forces affecting vulnerable children today. Rebecca told the audience of several hundred professionals. When we see something concerning and assume someone else will handle it, we're potentially condemning a child to continued suffering or even death. She presented data from the Foundation's work, showing how community education programs had led to measurable improvements in child safety outcomes. She also shared stories from other communities that had implemented similar programs, demonstrating that the model was scalable and effective. During the question and answer session, a pediatrician from Chicago asked about the psychological impact on children who'd been helped through the Foundation's programs. Rebecca was able to share Tyler and Emma's recovery journey, noting that early intervention and community support had been crucial to their healing. Tyler and Emma are not just survivors, Rebecca said. They're thriving children who have turned their trauma into purpose. Tyler wants to be a police officer when he grows up so he can help other kids like himself. Emma wants to be a veterinarian so she can take care of horses like Thunder. They've transformed their experience into hope for the future. After the conference, Rebecca was approached by a literary agent who wanted to help her write a book about the Foundation's work. She was also invited to appear on several national television programs and to speak at universities and community organizations around the country. The attention was gratifying, but Rebecca remained focused on the work itself. She returned to Texas with renewed energy and several new partnership opportunities that could expand the Foundation's reach. Tyler and Emma were waiting for her at the airport, holding a banner they'd made that read, "Welcome home, Horse Mom." The sight of their happy faces reminded Rebecca why she'd started this journey in the first place. Miss Rebecca," Tyler called out, running toward her with his arms outstretched. "We missed you so much. Did you tell everyone about how we help other kids now?" Emma, now much more confident and talkative, added, "And did you tell them about thunder? Because thunder is really important too." Rebecca laughed, hugging both children tightly. "I told them everything, including how brave and smart you both are. And yes, I definitely mentioned thunder's important role in our story." Linda approached with a warm smile and a folder full of papers. "Welcome back, Rebecca. You'll be happy to know that while you were gone, we got approval for 3 new community programs. One in Dallas, one in Houston, and one in San Antonio. Your conference presentation is already making waves." The drive back to the ranch gave Rebecca time to catch up on everything that had happened during her week away. The foundation had received its largest single donation, yet $50,000 from a tech entrepreneur who'd heard about their work through the national media coverage. 3 more states had requested information about implementing their community education programs. But the most exciting news came from Tyler himself. "Miss Rebecca, guess what? I'm going to be in a movie." Rebecca looked at Linda with raised eyebrows. "A movie?" Linda explained that a documentary filmmaker had approached them about creating a feature-length film about the Foundation's work and its impact on communities across the country. It would follow several families who have been helped by the Foundation, show the community education programs in action, and highlight the policy changes that have resulted from your advocacy work. The idea was both thrilling and intimidating. Rebecca had grown comfortable with public speaking and media interviews, but a feature documentary would be a different level of exposure entirely. "What do you think?" Linda asked. "It could be a powerful way to reach even more people and inspire more communities to get involved." Rebecca thought about all the children who might be helped if their story reached an even wider audience. "Let's do it. But we need to make sure Tyler and Emma are comfortable with the process and that their privacy is protected." Tyler was practically bouncing in his seat. "I want to be in the movie. I want to tell everyone about how you saved us and how we help other kids now." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "And Thunder should be in the movie too." Over the next few months, Rebecca found herself balancing foundation work with documentary filming. The cameras followed her as she gave presentations to community groups, worked with legislators on policy changes, and visited families who'd been helped by the Foundation's programs. The filmmaker, Marcus Rodriguez, was particularly interested in the ripple effects of Rebecca's original decision to stop and help. He interviewed several people who'd been inspired by Tyler and Emma's story to take action in their own communities. One of the most powerful interviews was with Jennifer, the woman who'd commented on Rebecca's original social media post about driving past someone who needed help years earlier. Jennifer had since become a volunteer with the Foundation and had personally helped rescue 2 children from a dangerous situation. "Rebecca's story made me realize that my inaction had consequences," Jennifer told the camera. "I couldn't change what I'd done in the past, but I could change how I responded going forward. Now I'm the person who stops. I'm the person who makes that phone call. I'm the person who gets involved." The documentary also captured the ongoing relationship between Rebecca and Tyler and Emma. The children had become genuine members of Rebecca's extended family, spending weekends at the ranch and considering her their horse mom in every meaningful way. Tyler, now 7 years old, had grown into a confident, articulate child who spoke passionately about helping other kids. Emma, at 5, was still quieter but showed remarkable empathy and understanding for someone so young. Miss Rebecca taught us that one person can make a big difference, Tyler said during his interview for the documentary. She saved us, and then she helped us save other kids too. That's what heroes do. The documentary, titled The Horse Mom, a story of rescue and recovery, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival the following January. Rebecca attended with Tyler, Emma, and Linda, walking the red carpet and giving interviews to entertainment reporters who were fascinated by the real-life story behind the film. The film received critical acclaim and was picked up by a major streaming service, reaching millions of viewers worldwide. The Tyler and Emma Foundation's website crashed again from the traffic, and Rebecca found herself fielding calls from international organizations wanting to implement similar programs. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from a teacher in rural Montana who emailed Rebecca after watching the documentary. "I saw your film last week, and yesterday I noticed something concerning about one of my students. Instead of assuming someone else would handle it, I made the call. That little girl is now safe with her grandmother instead of being neglected by her drug-addicted parents. Thank you for teaching me not to look away." Rebecca read the email aloud to Tyler and Emma as they sat together on the ranch porch, watching thunder graze in the evening light. Stories like this one reminded her why all the hard work, media attention, and public scrutiny were worth it. "Miss Rebecca," Emma said, snuggling closer to her on the porch swing, "how many kids do you think we've helped now?" Rebecca pulled up the Foundation's latest impact report on her phone. "Well, we've directly helped over 500 children with financial assistance for medical care, therapy, and basic needs. Our education programs have reached over 100,000 people in 25 states, and we know of at least 50 specific cases where someone took action because of what they learned from our programs." Tyler, always the serious one, asked, "But how many kids are there who still need help?" It was a sobering question, one that Rebecca grappled with regularly. "There are still too many kids who need help, Tyler. But that's why we keep doing this work. Every child we help, every person we educate, every community we inspire, it all adds up to make the world a little bit safer for kids like you and Emma." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. A simple decision to get off her horse and investigate what looked like garbage beside the road had led to a national movement, a documentary film, and most importantly, the rescue and recovery of two precious children who'd become the center of her world. The work was far from over. There would always be more children who needed help, more communities that needed education, more policies that needed changing. But Rebecca had learned that sustained change happened one decision at a time, one person at a time, one community at a time. And it all started with choosing not to ride past someone who needed help. The success of the documentary brought new challenges and opportunities. Rebecca found herself testifying before Congress about child welfare reform, speaking at international conferences on community response to child abuse, and working with technology companies to develop apps that could help people report concerning situations more easily. The Tyler and Emma Foundation had grown into a national organization with a staff of 12 and programs in all 50 states. They'd helped over 1,000 children directly and had educated more than 250,000 people through their community programs. But the most significant development came on a warm Tuesday morning in May, when Rebecca received a call from the White House. The president wanted to invite her to a ceremony recognizing Americans who'd made extraordinary contributions to child welfare. "Miss Rebecca," Tyler said when she shared the news, "does this mean you're going to meet the president?" "It looks that way," Rebecca replied, still somewhat stunned by the invitation. Emma, now 6 and full of questions about everything, wanted to know if she and Tyler could come too. "We want to meet the president and tell him about Thunder." Rebecca laughed, hugging both children. "I think the president would love to hear about Thunder, and about how 2 brave kids helped create a movement to protect other children." The White House ceremony was scheduled for June, and Rebecca spent the weeks leading up to it preparing remarks about the importance of community involvement in child protection. She also worked with the Foundation's board to launch a new initiative, the Community Hero Recognition Program, which would honor people who'd taken action to help children in their own communities. The night before the ceremony, Rebecca sat in her hotel room in Washington, D.C., video calling with Tyler and Emma back in Texas. They were staying at the ranch with Carlos, who'd become their honorary grandfather over the past 2 years. "Are you nervous, Miss Rebecca?" Tyler asked, his 7-year-old face serious with concern. "A little," Rebecca admitted. "But I keep thinking about that morning when I found you both by the road. If I'd been brave enough to stop then, I can be brave enough to speak at the White House now." Emma, ever practical, had a suggestion. "Just pretend the president is like Thunder. Thunder is really important, but he's also really nice. Maybe the president is like that too." Rebecca smiled, touched by Emma's simple wisdom. "That's excellent advice, sweetheart. I'll remember that." The ceremony the next day was held in the Rose Garden, with Rebecca among 12 Americans being honored for their contributions to child welfare, education, and community service. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small photo of Tyler and Emma in her purse for luck. When the president called her name, Rebecca stepped forward to receive the Presidential Citizens Medal, one of the highest honors given to civilians. As the president placed the medal around her neck, he leaned in to speak quietly. "I've heard remarkable things about your work, Ms. Martinez. The courage you showed in stopping to help those children, and the dedication you've shown in building a movement around their rescue. That's the kind of leadership that changes the world." Rebecca felt tears in her eyes as she shook the president's hand. "Thank you, sir. But I hope everyone understands that I'm just one person who made a choice to help. The real heroes are the thousands of people who have joined this movement and the communities that have chosen to protect their most vulnerable members. In her speech to the gathered crowd, Rebecca spoke about the power of individual action and community responsibility. She told Tyler and Emma's story, emphasizing how their rescue had been just the beginning of a much larger journey toward creating safer communities for all children. 2 years ago, I was just a rancher's daughter doing routine work on my family's land, Rebecca said. I never imagined that a simple decision to investigate what looked like garbage beside the road would lead to a national movement. But that's the power of choosing to act when someone needs help. You never know how far those ripples will spread. She concluded with a challenge to the audience. Every day, each of us has opportunities to make a difference in someone's life. We can choose to look away, to assume someone else will handle it, to mind our own business. Or we can choose to be the person who stops, who cares, who acts. Tyler and Emma are alive and thriving today because I made that choice. How many other children could be saved if we all made that choice? The speech was met with a standing ovation, and Rebecca felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that she'd used this platform to advocate for vulnerable children everywhere. After the ceremony, she called Tyler and Emma to share every detail of the day. They were fascinated by her description of the White House, the Rose Garden, and meeting the president. "Did you tell him about our foundation?" Tyler asked eagerly. "Did you tell him about Thunder?" Emma added, still convinced that the horse was a crucial part of their story. "I told him everything," Rebecca assured them. "And he said he's very proud of both of you for being so brave and for helping other kids." That evening, Rebecca attended a reception with the other honorees and various officials. She found herself in conversations about policy, funding, and the future of child welfare reform. But her mind kept returning to Tyler and Emma, safe at the ranch with Carlos, probably getting ready for bed and arguing about who got to feed Thunder in the morning. The real measure of her success wasn't the medal or the ceremony or the national recognition. It was two healthy, happy children who'd learned that they mattered, that their community cared about them, and that they had the power to help other kids facing similar challenges. As she prepared for bed that night, Rebecca looked at the Presidential Citizen's Medal sitting on her hotel dresser. Tomorrow, she would fly back to Texas and return to the work of running the foundation, advocating for policy changes, and being Tyler and Emma's horse mom. The work would continue, one community at a time, one child at a time, one person at a time, choosing not to drive past someone who needed help. The months following the White House ceremony brought both celebration and reflection. The Tyler and Emma Foundation had achieved national recognition, but Rebecca was more focused on the day-to-day work of helping children and strengthening communities. Tyler, now 8 years old, had become an articulate advocate for child welfare in his own right. He'd started a program at his elementary school called No Kid Alone, where students learned about looking out for each other and reporting concerns to trusted adults. Emma, at 6, was quieter but equally passionate, often drawing pictures of children being helped by caring adults that the foundation used in their educational materials. The foundation's impact continued to grow. They'd now helped over 2,000 children directly and had educated more than 500,000 people through their programs. More importantly, they documented over 200 cases where someone had taken action to help a child because of what they'd learned from the foundation's work. One of the most significant developments was the passage of the Community Child Protection Act, federal legislation that Rebecca had helped draft and advocate for. The law provided funding for community education programs, improved coordination between agencies, and established standards for training first responders in child welfare situations. "Rebecca," Linda said one afternoon as they reviewed the Foundation's annual report, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day?" Rebecca considered the question seriously. "I try not to think about it too much because it's too heartbreaking. But sometimes I wonder how many other Tyler and Emmas there have been over the years, children who needed help and didn't get it because everyone assumed someone else would handle it." The Foundation had started tracking data on this phenomenon, working with researchers to study the bystander effect as it related to child welfare. Their preliminary findings suggested that situations like Tyler and Emma's abandonment were far more common than most people realized. "That's why the work matters so much," Rebecca continued. "Every person we educate, every community we train, every policy we change, it all adds up to create a safety net for vulnerable children." Tyler had been listening to their conversation while working on his homework at the kitchen table. "Miss Rebecca," he said, looking up from his math problems, "do you think there are kids right now who need help like we did?" Rebecca nodded sadly. "I'm sure there are, Tyler, but I also know there are more people now who are willing to help because of what we've all learned together." Emma, who'd been quietly coloring at the table, held up her latest artwork. It showed a woman on a horse stopping to help two small children, with the words, "Don't drive past," written in crayon at the bottom. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Rebecca said, admiring the drawing. "Would you like to donate it to the Foundation for our next newsletter?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I want everyone to know that they shouldn't drive past kids who need help." As summer approached, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the 3-year anniversary of finding Tyler and Emma. The Foundation was planning a celebration event, bringing together families they'd helped, volunteers who'd contributed to their work, and community leaders who'd implemented their programs. But Rebecca also wanted to do something more personal to mark the anniversary. She proposed to Linda that they take Tyler and Emma back to the spot where she'd found them, not as a traumatic reminder, but as a celebration of how far they'd all come. "I think it could be healing," Rebecca explained. "To go back there as a family, as survivors, as people who have turned their trauma into purpose, and maybe it would help them understand how much they've changed the world." Linda was initially hesitant, but agreed after discussing it with Tyler and Emma's therapist. The children themselves were enthusiastic about the idea, seeing it as an adventure rather than a source of anxiety. On the exact anniversary of the day Rebecca had found them, the 4 of them drove out to Miller's Creek. The spot looked different now. The county had installed a small memorial marker recognizing the location's significance in the foundation's founding story. Tyler and Emma ran around the area, playing and laughing, showing no signs of trauma or fear. They were simply two healthy, happy children enjoying a family outing. "Miss Rebecca," Tyler said, standing in the exact spot where she'd found them huddled together. "This is where our story started, right?" "That's right," Rebecca replied, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where I realized that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply stop and help someone who needs it." Emma picked up a small wildflower from the grass and handed it to Rebecca. "This is for you, for stopping when other people didn't." Rebecca accepted the flower, feeling the weight of everything that had happened since that September morning 3 years ago. Two frightened, abandoned children had become confident, caring kids who were helping other children in need. A simple act of compassion had grown into a national movement that was changing how communities responded to vulnerable children. As they stood together in the place where it all began, Rebecca made a promise to herself, to Tyler and Emma, and to all the children who might need help in the future. She would never stop working to create a world where no child was invisible, where every community looked out for its most vulnerable members, and where people chose to help instead of driving past. The work would continue, one child at a time, one community at a time, one person at a time choosing to make a difference. The story that had started with two abandoned children on a dusty Texas road had become a testament to the power of individual action and community responsibility. And it was far from over. As autumn arrived, Rebecca found herself busier than ever. The foundation had been selected to receive a major grant from a national children's charity, which would allow them to expand their programs internationally. They'd also been approached by the United Nations to develop educational materials for use in refugee camps, where abandoned and separated children were a persistent problem. Tyler and Emma, now established fixtures in the Foundation's work, had become junior ambassadors for child safety. They regularly spoke at school assemblies and community events, sharing their story with age-appropriate language and encouraging other children to seek help when they needed it. "We want kids to know that it's okay to ask for help," Tyler explained to a group of second graders at a local elementary school. "And we want grown-ups to know that they should always help kids, even if they're strangers." Emma, now more confident in public speaking, added, "And if you see a kid who looks scared or alone, you should tell a grown-up you trust. That's what heroes do." Rebecca watched these presentations with pride and amazement. The children who'd once been too frightened to speak to her, when she'd found them beside the road, had become articulate advocates for child welfare. Their transformation was proof that trauma didn't have to define a child's future. The international expansion of the Foundation's work brought new challenges. Rebecca found herself traveling to countries where child abandonment and abuse were even more common than in the United States, working with local organizations to adapt their programs for different cultural contexts. On a trip to Kenya, she met with a group of social workers who were implementing a version of the Foundation's community education program in rural villages. The program had already led to the rescue of several children who'd been abandoned or abused, and community leaders were reporting increased awareness of child welfare issues. "Your story has given us hope," one social worker told Rebecca during a meeting in Nairobi. "When people hear about Tyler and Emma, they understand that one person really can make a difference. It inspires them to take action in their own communities." Rebecca was moved by the global impact of their work, but she remained grounded in the personal relationships that had started it all. She video called Tyler and Emma regularly during her travels, sharing stories about the children she was meeting and the communities she was visiting. "Miss Rebecca," Tyler said during one of these calls, "do you think there are kids in Kenya who need horse moms too?" Rebecca laughed, touched by his innocent question. "I think there are kids everywhere who need adults who care about them and are willing to help. They might not need horse moms specifically, but they need people who won't drive past when they're in trouble." When Rebecca returned from her international trip, she found that Tyler and Emma had been busy with their own project. They'd convinced their teacher to let them create a presentation about the foundation's work for their school's International Day celebration. "We want to tell everyone about how helping kids in America can help kids all over the world," Tyler explained, as he showed Rebecca their poster board covered with pictures and facts about the Foundation's programs. Emma had drawn a world map with smiling children on every continent, connected by lines to show how the Foundation's work was spreading. "Look, Miss Rebecca, we're helping kids everywhere." The presentation was a hit at the school event, and several parents approached Rebecca afterward to ask about volunteering with the foundation or starting similar programs in their own communities. As winter approached, Rebecca began planning for what would be her biggest challenge yet: a national conference on child welfare that would bring together advocates, policymakers, and practitioners from around the world. The Tyler and Emma Foundation would be the primary organizer, and Rebecca would deliver the keynote address. "Are you nervous?" Linda asked as they reviewed the conference agenda. "Terrified," Rebecca admitted, "but also excited. This could be the platform we need to take our work to the next level." Tyler, overhearing their conversation, offered his own perspective. "Miss Rebecca, just remember what you always tell us. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to care and try to help. That's what makes someone a hero." Rebecca hugged him tightly, amazed once again by the wisdom of this 8-year-old boy who'd experienced more trauma and recovery than most adults. "Thank you, Tyler. That's exactly what I needed to hear." As she prepared for the conference, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 4 years ago, she'd been a rancher's daughter with no experience in child welfare, public speaking, or running a nonprofit organization. Now she was preparing to address an international audience about community response to child abuse and abandonment. The transformation had been gradual but profound. Each challenge had built on the last, each success had opened new doors, and each setback had taught valuable lessons. But at the heart of it all remained the same simple principle that had guided her from the beginning. When someone needs help, you don't drive past. The conference would be another opportunity to share that message, to inspire more people to take action, and to continue building a world where no child was invisible to their community. As Rebecca finalized her keynote speech, she included a line that had become her personal motto: "Heroes aren't born, they're made by the choices they make when someone needs help." It was a lesson she'd learned from Tyler and Emma, and one she hoped to pass on to everyone who heard their story. The National Conference on Community Child Protection opened on a crisp January morning in Chicago, with over 800 attendees from 6 countries. Rebecca stood at the podium looking out at an audience of social workers, law enforcement officers, teachers, healthcare providers, and community leaders, all united by their commitment to protecting children. 4.5 years ago, Rebecca began, I was just a rancher's daughter doing routine work on my family's land. I had no training in child welfare, no experience with advocacy, no platform or influence. But I had something that turned out to be more important than any of those things. I had a choice. She told Tyler and Emma's story once again, but this time she focused on the lessons learned and the systems that had been changed as a result. She presented data showing how community education programs had led to earlier intervention in cases of child abuse and abandonment, how policy changes had improved coordination between agencies, and how the bystander effect could be overcome through proper training and awareness. The Tyler and Emma Foundation has directly helped over 3,000 children in the past 4 years, Rebecca continued. We've educated more than 750,000 people through our programs. We've documented over 400 cases where someone took action to help a child because of what they learned from our work. She paused, looking out at the engaged faces in the audience. But those numbers, impressive as they are, don't tell the whole story. The real impact is in the communities that have chosen to prioritize child welfare, in the individuals who have decided to be the person who stops instead of the person who drives past, in the systems that have been reformed to put children's safety first. Rebecca introduced several speakers who would share their own experiences implementing the Foundation's programs. There was Dr. Sarah Chen, a pediatrician from Seattle who'd helped establish a rapid response system for child welfare emergencies. There was Officer Michael Rodriguez from Phoenix, who developed training materials for law enforcement based on the Foundation's work. There was Maria Santos, a teacher from rural Montana who'd created a school-based program for recognizing and reporting child abuse. But the most powerful presentation came from Tyler and Emma themselves, now 9 and 7 years old respectively. They'd insisted on being part of the conference, and Rebecca had worked with them to prepare remarks that were both age-appropriate and impactful. Tyler spoke first, his voice clear and confident. My name is Tyler, and this is my sister Emma. 4.5 years ago, we were left beside a road by someone who was supposed to take care of us. We were scared, hungry, and alone. Lots of people drove past us, but Miss Rebecca stopped to help. Emma continued, Miss Rebecca didn't just help us that day. She helped us get better, helped us feel safe again, and helped us learn that we could help other kids too. Now, We travel around telling people about how important it is to help kids when they need it. Tyler resumed speaking. We want everyone to know that when you see a kid who looks scared or alone or hurt, you should help them. Don't think that someone else will do it. Don't drive past. Be the person who stops. The audience gave them a standing ovation, and Rebecca felt tears in her eyes as she watched these remarkable children share their story with such poise and purpose. The conference concluded with the launch of the International Community Child Protection Initiative, a collaborative effort between the Tyler and Emma Foundation and several global organizations. The initiative would work to implement community-based child protection programs in countries around the world, with a particular focus on regions where children were most vulnerable to abandonment and abuse. Rebecca was elected to serve as the initiative's first president, a role that would require even more travel and responsibility, but also offered the opportunity to create lasting change on a global scale. As the conference ended and attendees prepared to return to their home communities, Rebecca felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The movement that had started with 2 abandoned children on a Texas road had grown into an international effort involving thousands of people and organizations. Tyler and Emma found her as she was packing up her materials. "Miss Rebecca," Tyler said, "do you think we did good today?" Rebecca knelt down to their level, looking into their bright, confident faces. "You did more than good, Tyler. You were amazing. Both of you. You showed everyone here that children who have been through terrible things can not only survive but thrive and help others." Emma hugged her tightly. "Are you proud of us?" "I am so proud of you both," Rebecca replied, meaning every word. "And I'm proud of everyone who was here today, everyone who's chosen to make child protection a priority in their communities. This is how we change the world, one person at a time, one community at a time, one choice at a time." As they walked out of the conference center together, Rebecca reflected on how much had changed since that September morning when she'd found 2 frightened children beside a dusty road. The work was far from over. There would always be children who needed help, communities that needed education, and systems that needed reform. But the foundation had been laid for something lasting and powerful. The Tyler and Emma Foundation and the International Community Child Protection Initiative represented a new approach to child welfare, one that recognized the crucial role of community members in protecting vulnerable children. The story that had started with one woman's decision to get off her horse and help 2 children in need had become a global movement. And it would continue to grow, one rescued child at a time, one educated community at a time, one person at a time choosing not to drive past someone who needed help. The end was really just the beginning.